This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.
What we're trying to do is to lay that foundation. And we have seen any number of situations where when you bring people together, when you help to foster the development of friendships and goodwill, that then those sorts of things will more naturally occur, and you don't have to necessarily work as hard at that because you've got the underlying trust. So I think this is the right way to kind of enter into these kinds of discussions and then see where they go from there.
The Village Square, a nervy bunch of liberals and conservatives who believe that disagreement and dialogue make for a good conversation, a good country, and a good time. At the Village Square, we talk about politics, religion, and race. You know, the topics your mom taught you never to discuss in polite company. Listen, at the Village Square, we make pigs fly.
Hey folks, welcome to Village Squarecast. This is Corey Nathan. I am so glad to be with you again. Thank you for joining us for the latest edition of the Flying Pig Academy. Carom Shots change everything. Funding for this program was provided through a grant from Florida Humanities with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Check out Florida Humanities online at floridahumanities.org. That's floridahumanities.org. In this conversation, we are joined by Liz Joyner, our founder and CEO, and Bill Mattox, the former board chair of Village Square and the senior director of the J. Stanley Marshall Center for Education Freedom at the James Madison Institute. It is a thought-provoking, big idea-inspiring, bridge-building conversation. It always is when Liz and Bill get together. So I'll just turn it right over to these wonderful people, and I'll drop back in after they wrap up. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone. We're back with another episode of Village Squarecast, and this topic is Carom Shots, why working upstream from conflict is so powerful, or how to become a civility pool shark. This is another episode in our Flying Pig Academy series, the newest thing in higher education. And by higher, I mean really higher. You better look up. This has been a dream of the Village Square with support of Florida Humanities for many years now, and it's finally airborne, one might say. Maybe too many puns. So really the thing about our Flying Pig Academy is that we think that what seems impossible in the current environment in terms of the just deep divisions is actually way more possible than one might think. Back with us again today, he is clearly a glutton for punishment. It's Bill Mattox. His day job, his day job is with the think tank James Madison Institute. And importantly, he is our former long-serving Village Square board chair. And maybe most importantly to this particular conversation about Carom Shots is he is the one who invented the concept. So, Bill, what is a Carom Shot?
So I don't know. Early in my youth, I remember playing bumper pool, which is really similar in many ways to traditional billiards. And one of the things that I noticed in kind of learning how to succeed at both is that oftentimes direct shots are either not possible or not advisable, and that you're more likely to have success if you hit a ball off the bumper on the side, or if you hit one ball into another, you're more likely to succeed with a carom shot than with a direct hit. And with that as kind of a idea in the back of my mind, when we started putting together topics and panels and programs for the Village Square, oftentimes I think we ran into situations where we were dealing with topics that were so hot and so delicate and so fraught with danger that if you sought to approach them in the traditional way by kind of going in through the front door, or taking a direct shot at it, you were likely to see everything kind of blow up in your face. And maybe the discussion wouldn't go off the rails. I mean, hopefully after a time, a lot of our friends and neighbors here in Tallahassee have learned kind of the Village Square way. But oftentimes, if you kind of go at issues in a conventional fashion, you still, though you may end up not having fireworks, you may still not have the most constructive conversation, because the kind of lines of debate or discussion or conversation are more apt to follow kind of traditional battle between the warring sides, if you will. Whereas if instead you come at the same idea, but in an unconventional way, you may actually not only avoid fireworks, but you may also end up having a much more constructive conversation, because all of a sudden everyone is now talking about things that are that don't fit neatly into traditional debate lines or whatnot. And people don't just kind of fall back on their traditional talking points or the arguments for their side on this topic or that topic. You're just more likely to have kind of a real conversation, and a constructive one potentially, that leads to the discovery of common ground or new ways of thinking about things. So when we go then to frame topics and to come up with program ideas, we often, especially when we're kind of treading into dangerous territory, we often look for, could we come at this with a carom shot rather than a direct shot? And might that lead to a more constructive conversation?
So this is kind of countercultural, isn't it? I mean, in some ways, I think of the moment that we're in as one where the biggest, ugliest, deepest controversies kind of suck you right towards them. They kind of stand up and demand your direct attention rather than an indirect approach.
Yeah, no, that's very perceptive, because you're right. When you think about like kind of food fight TV, what a lot of the news channels and even some major podcasters and others do is they look for what is the most incendiary way that I can frame a topic so that all of the people who agree with me are frothing at the mouth, and anyone who would even flirt with thinking about this in the way the other side thinks about it would be shamed. And what we're doing here is really very different. And in many ways, our purpose is very different. And in those situations, those are media personalities that are playing to, a crowd that already agrees with them. And oftentimes the most outrageous or most provocative voice, gets the most attention. And what we're trying to do is very different. We're trying to have constructive conversations about real issues that bring people together, not in a way that causes folks to compromise their principles or to back down from deeply held convictions, but that perhaps helps them to see that sometimes people who don't fully agree with them may agree with them in part, or may at least share a common goal. And then the discussion becomes more about means to a common end rather than simply besmirching the reputation of anyone who disagrees, in toto with what you have to say. So anyway, our purpose here is to bring constructive conversations and the discovery of common ground. And so, yeah, that does lend itself. I guess, sadly, in our day, this does end up being kind of countercultural, because so much of our media culture these days is not designed to do that, but in many ways just the opposite.
Which makes me wonder if that some part of the explanation of why we are where we are is that we're having way more of that input in our lives than we are the kind of input that we try to create at the Village Square. It also makes me think about how, maybe one of the mechanisms by which Carom Shots work has something to do with John Haidt's Rider and Elephant. And that really what we're doing is we're putting people in proximity to people who are different than them, um, doing something that it isn't directly pinging the deepest conflict immediately,
Mm.
which would be that giant electromagnetic suck into the different sides, but rather engage indirectly, so that people have the opportunity for their elephants to lean slightly to the other elephants in the room.
No, I think that's right. Yeah, we're tapping into kind of what he has shown works in terms of building goodwill as well as facilitating constructive conversations. But I have to say as well, part of what I love about Carom Shots is that we often just have more fun because we end up. I think people when we do this well, and I'm sure there have been some times when we've, just as I did as a kid playing billiards, took some carom shots that didn't work and that I might have regretted. But and I'm sure we've done that some as well. But when I think about this, I just think about situations where we've had we've had fun, and where the people who come to these programs, I think, kind of appreciate that, hey, you've found a way to engage me in creatively in a discussion that I would not have otherwise ever had an opportunity to take part in. And I find it refreshing that instead of asking me to participate in the same old tired debate about the same issues, you have instead found a new or refreshing way to cover some of the same ground, but in a new way, in a fresh way.
Yeah. But people so underestimate the value in having a good time together.
Hmm.
They that that and that's the kind of environment where you can create hive switch moments with a group of people that really do change things and really change the way that you see people who disagree with you. And it's amazingly underplayed, although in really challenging times it gets harder and harder to approach things in that kind of a way.
It does, but it also, in my mind, almost becomes more and more necessary to find carom shot approaches that allow you to engage in conversations kind of coming in through the back door rather than the traditional front door. And I think we've probably most seen this in practice on topics surrounding race, which are always delicate, and perhaps especially in a context like ours. Um, and so, some of the programs that we've done where, I mean, just this week, the program for our Created Equal program series was built around African American music and kind of some of the distinctive styles and contributions that Black artists have made over the years to the larger American music scene. And I think, we've had other conversations in the past and programs in the past, as on, sports and how, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of Jackie Robinson's birth in a neighboring town not several years ago, and I think that was a kind of a way to introduce topics surrounding race and racial segregation and integration in a way that was unconventional and that drew in a lot of baseball fans that would probably have never come to a typical conversation around race, but because of their love of baseball, came and took part and enjoyed. And I think the same thing happened this week with the music program, where some folks who might not otherwise take part in a conversation around race because of their love of music and their appreciation for the distinctive contributions that African American artists have made, said, "Hey, this is something I'd like to attend. I'd like to take part in." And so those are some simple ways that we have found to kind of enter into deeper, larger, more delicate conversations about race and racial division and overcoming those. And in some ways, some of these topics themselves even kind of provide illustrations of how this has been done in the past, or it's. I mean, no one who's seen some of the work that Ken Burns has done, like his series about jazz music or his series about baseball, can deny that in many ways the demonstration of African American talent in those areas helped lay the groundwork for the civil rights successes that came thereafter, because having established excellence and the fact that African Americans could very much compete on a level playing field, if you will, in both the entertainment industry and in the world of sports, it then became easier for people to make arguments that said, "Hey, ought we not provide equal opportunity in every arena for folks who have been held back by first slavery and then later, Jim Crow?" So yeah, these are unconventional ways to enter into discussions that are often delicate but much needed. And I think we've had some notable success with these carom shots, if you will.
Well, it's interesting. It's become such a part of how we do business, and we talk about it just like, okay, what's our carom shot here?
Yeah.
And of course, nobody else would really know exactly what we were talking about until it's popularized from sea to shining sea. Like everybody's going to know what a carom shot is, and they should. But created equal, the topic 2 nights ago in our series with Leon County government is a perfect example of a carom shot. And in fact, carom shots become more and more important to take, the more difficult it would be to gather people at the time. So as division has grown deeper, we've leaned on the concept of carom shots much more heavily. And interestingly, it again, to sort of its counterculture nature, one of the things that sometimes we hear from people is, well, what do you do? What do you do? And well, we make people hate each other less. We make them see the humanity in people who disagree with them. And that's the basis of our challenge. But what do? You didn't decide any policy outcome, or you didn't, find some sort of agreement. And I think that is very often a very foundational misperception of the problem at hand.
Yeah, in order for, I mean, this is straight out of John Haidt. In order for you to have the joint statement that everyone signs, or whatever the kind of common work product, if you will, to come out of these kind of conversations, before you can ever really expect to achieve that, you've got to have a foundational building of goodwill and of trust and of appreciation, often for difference. And so what we're trying to do is to lay that foundation. And we have seen any number of situations where when you bring people together, when you help to foster the development of friendships and goodwill, that then those sorts of things will more naturally occur, and you don't have to necessarily work as hard at that, um, because you've got the underlying trust. So um, I think this is the right way to kind of enter into these kinds of discussions and then see where they go from there.
To me, one of the quintessential illustrations of the use of carom shots, albeit they sadly, I do not believe, called them that, is we had Dr. Gary Mason as a God Squad guest many years ago, and Gary was involved he's from Northern Ireland, and he was very deeply involved in addressing the deep sectarian rift between Catholics and Protestants. And one of the things that he taught us in that work is that at some point they had sat around the conference table, the 18 million different tables, directly hammering out, an agreement that wasn't necessarily coming, that they specifically decided to change up their tactics. And so instead of the endless sort of landlocked, stuck conversations, they did carom shots. They got Protestants and Catholics together to string Christmas lights. They got Catholics and Protestants together to build community centers. And that shift in strategy was very foundational to the fact that they were able to then move along from there after having had those moments and taken those carom shots.
Mm. No, it's really good. There's an illustration I know you've used before of some like beer company or beer commercial where folks came together in some way like this. Why don't you
Yeah.
describe that?
Yes, it's the Heineken Worlds Apart ad campaign. And it invites two pairs of people who are about as different as they can get intentionally. And we know who the pairs are, and we know, what their background is. But they don't know when they come in and they're invited to build a bar together. And so they're in assembly instructions, and they get to know each other through the process of building the bar together and as humans. And then they invite them to sit down, and they watch videotapes where they're speaking in ways that are foundationally abhorrent to each other.
Hmm.
Um, and and we'll put the link to this video in the show notes. And then they were asked, would you like to have a beer together, or would you like to just go? And it really is beautiful. And it's funny because I think that an average person stumbling along this video would kind of go, okay, that's wonderful. They decided to stay and have the beer together, but that's not really real. That wouldn't really happen. And the thing that's amazing is we see it happen
Yeah.
all the time. You put people in the conditions that are important are um, positive contact and a common purpose. And the common purpose can, and maybe and sometimes should, be something like building a bar together, a carom shot. Because if their common purpose was, aimed directly at the conflict between them, the differences between them, it wouldn't have turned out the same way.
Yeah, I really like that example because I mean it just illustrates the basic point here, which is unconventional approaches coming at things in ways that catch people a little bit off guard, but that are ultimately fun and inviting, and that allow them to discover their appreciation for their neighbor, even though their neighbor may see the world completely different. I mean that's what that Heineken ad was trying to do, or exercise was trying to do, and it's what we are trying to do with the different programs that we have put together over the years.
And it really is an amazing, if you create the conditions correctly. And as you said, we have hits and we have misses. But if you create the conditions correctly, it's an amazing human superpower you see to get past the superficial differences and to start seeing a reciprocal kindness. And I think for anybody who was involved in that, built a bar together and kind of went, whoa, that person was not who I thought they were. It creates a lasting difference in your opinion.
Yeah.
It's like you kind of can't go back. Because you've had that experience of your brain being sort of blown.
Yeah.
And carom shots are really one of the most important parts of creating those experiences. And like I don't know what we would do if you hadn't have thought of carom shots.
I we need to go on to a different topic because you give me too much credit. I'm not doing anything that others haven't done. I just put a name to it for our purposes that may be helpful. But this is great. Enjoyed the conversation very much, Liz.
So as did I, recapping, have a little fun with carom shots when you're trying to address a challenge, and you might be shocked with where you land, and we'll have another conversation later about other hot tips. And thanks for hanging, Bill.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Well, that was fun. I'm kind of digging this. This is like, what would you call? I wish I knew the name of the different sizes at Starbucks. Like, is the little one called the venti? I don't know. It's like the small, the 12 ounce, the 12 ounce Flying Pig Academy. Anyway, Corey Nathan back here with you. I really did, but so much in, this get together with Bill and Liz took away a lot. Obviously, going at issues in a more unconventional way instead of directly, because things can get so heated so fast. Absolutely. I love the concept of carom shots. I was thinking when they started talking, like maybe it's because I've been listening to Bill and Liz so much and all these other guests, and that I was thinking before Bill even said it of those wonderful documentaries that Ken Burns. I learned so much about the history of African Americans through Ken Burns' documentaries, the jazz and baseball in particular. That was an ultimate artistic expression of a carom shot, learning history in a tangential way, but in a deep and profound way. And what really resonated, one of the things that really resonated with me was when Liz was talking about Catholics and Protestants in Ireland and how there were other ways. There was, a diplomatic, political carom shot. And it immediately got me thinking, I have family in Israel. So obviously there's been heated conflict there since October 7th of 2023. And there was a story about a year ago on CBS Sunday Morning, and it resonated with the story that I know, my family. And it was about a Palestinian and Israeli civil engineers, two civil engineers. There was a development being built in which some Palestinians would be living and some Israelis would be living, but they were mostly segregated. But the Palestinian engineer had to get together with the Israeli engineer and figure out the sewage system because the sewage system was going to be running through both parts of the town. So, and they ultimately became really good friends. Talk about the ultimate carom shot. And I talked to my cousin about it, and she's has had very similar experiences. And she said, yes, that is absolutely true. And she said she's become friends with Muslim Palestinians, Bedouin Palestinians, Christian Palestinians. And she said, because we had to literally figure out what to do with our crap. So if they can figure out what to do with their crap, a sewage system that runs through towns with all different kinds of people, I think we could figure some other stuff out too. So I'll just leave you with that. I think that's more than enough today. So please consider joining our members in supporting this programming. You can become a member for just $7 a month or $76 a year, and your business can join for $250. Go to villagesquare.us/donate to join today. That's villagesquare.us/donate. And while you're there, sign up for Village Square's newsletter to stay up to date with everything happening at the Village Square. You could go to villagesquare.us, villagesquare.us, and there's this pop-up box with the flying pig, and you could sign up right there. Or once you're on the page, you can also scroll down to the bottom for the sign-up box. Funding for this program was provided through a grant from Florida Humanities with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of Florida Humanities or the National Endowment for the Humanities. We really appreciate you listening to the latest edition of the Flying Pig Academy, Carom Shots Change Everything, with Liz Joyner and Bill Mattox. Until next time, we challenge you to reach out with an open heart and mind to someone who doesn't think or look like you. It really does change everything. Carom Shots changes everything. We'll talk to you soon, and thanks so much for listening to Village Squarecast.